Well, good morning, everyone. I am so glad that you were joining us. I just thought, it's morning for us, but maybe not morning for you when you're listening to this. But I have a really special guest on the podcast today, Michelle Vroom, and I have been connecting over the past couple of months, and I have been so inspired by you, Michelle, the way that you build your business, the way that you love your family, the way that you love the Lord. And so I know this conversation is going to be such a blessing to my audience. And so I want you to introduce yourself to us. Just tell us, like, what is it that you are juggling in this season of life?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation. First up, I'm juggling three boys. I'm a boy mom times three.
Wow, wow,
Get
wow.
that out of the way. Yeah. Shout out to all of my other boy moms. You don't have to have three boys to be a boy mom, right? We all
I
know
got my
even
girl at
even
the
just
end,
one.
and it
Yeah,
was a gift.
yeah. Even just one is a lot. No, I love them. I love being a mom. I love having three boys. I started my business. So I'm a business coach who helps. I've really leaned into this messaging in the last couple of months, but I'm helping done for you service providers scale their business and double their revenue without doubling their hours. That is something that
Ooh.
I have witnessed and seen in my business, and I don't think I've shared enough to be totally transparent. I'm really leaning into sharing more about that because you can talk about how much money you make, but what's more important is how much time it's actually taken me to do that. So I'm really leaning into that, which is very, very exciting. I do not believe that the amount of hours you have to work should limit how much money you make in your business. And we know that money isn't everything, right? But at the same time, we can use that money to bless our family, to bless the people around us, to bless our community, to bless our church. And so, that is important to me, right? To be the provider in whatever way the Lord has, designed for you, for those of you listening. And so that's really where I'm going in my business. I've been in business for 8.5 years. I started my business when my oldest son, who was about to turn 9 at the time of recording this, he
Wow.
was a 6-month-old baby. I was a new mom. I had been previously doing marketing and PR for corporate, and I liked my job. There was nothing wrong with it. But obviously, becoming a mom changed things for me. And I realized, you know what? I don't want to sacrifice my career and the work that I love to do, but I want to be present. I don't
Mm,
want to be commuting in and out of, I live outside of Philadelphia. I don't want to be commuting in and out of Philadelphia. And so it was truly a leap of faith for my family. I mean, I was the breadwinner at the time. And
mm.
so my husband and I had to really talk about, like, okay, are we doing this thing? Like, what is this going to require? It definitely required a lot of sacrifices, but the Lord is faithful. And, since kind of going out on my own, I think I went back after maternity leave for like 2 months to my job and then left because over maternity leave, I had been, building relationships, making connections, signing clients. And so, it did involve a short-term sacrifice, but the long-term fruit has been absolutely incredible. My family has had opportunities that would never have otherwise been possible, and my business has really been a blessing to us. So, I started as a done for you service provider myself, kind of doing all the things for clients as you do. You just try to get as much experience as possible. And then I moved into coaching about 2 years into business. I started making the shift into coaching. I really love the coaching, like relationship aspect. Being able to go deep with my clients, them feeling like they can trust me enough to share what's on their hearts. That just lights me up, right? That's the way that I operate. If you meet with me in person, I'm like the kind of person who's like, okay, how are you? Like, let's not forget surface level. Like, let's go deep,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
it really does, I think, play to my strengths. And so since, shifting into coaching about 2 years in, I also then moved from one-to-one coaching into group coaching and like really looked at how do I continue to serve and have an impact, but do so in a way that makes sense because I added two more children to the family, right?
Right.
My pandemic baby came in 2020, my third and final boy, and that threw me for a huge loop. That was going from two to three really struggled, to be totally honest. And so for me to be able to have a business that still provided for my family, but didn't require, that I add more hours when I didn't have them, like that was really powerful. At the time, my husband lost his job in 2020 temporarily with everything going on in the world for about a 6-month period. And so not only was I like preparing to give birth, right? I was like a month or two out from giving birth. I said to him, like, I've got this, I've got us covered. So my business, that was a real turning point for me. And I think that's what has fueled my fire to really help women, especially moms. A lot of women that I work with are moms, not let time or lack of time or their kids be a reason or an excuse not to do the things they want to do in business. And so if I can, provide that encouragement but also challenge us to think differently about our time, to think differently about how we scale our businesses, I am here for it.
Girl, you and I are speaking the same language. And I'm
Yes.
like so many things. I'm like, ding, ding, ding.
Yep.
Like
Yep. Yeah.
I love the double your revenue without doubling your time. Like
Mhm.
one of the
Yep.
things I've been really getting clear on, I think the Lord must have spoken to us about the same time,
Yeah.
is how to increase your ROI, which is,
Mhm.
the
Yep.
results on our time. And I measure it through impact and income, unless,
Yep.
and because it's this whole idea that we think if we are going to earn more or to have more impact or to be more successful or to grow our reach, it is going to have to involve more time. And that what that means is, I mean, we get 24, right? Regardless. So if I'm giving more in this area of business, then that means less of what's going to these other people and things that matter most. And I was that girl who I did make a lot of sacrifices. I said for my family. I'm saying this in air quotes for those of you listening on the podcast and not watching on YouTube. Um, because I was doing these things for my family. But guess what? Mom was in her office after dinner every single night. Mom had her own screen at movie night. Mom was always, what's mom doing? Oh, mom's working. Oh, just one more. I just got to do this one more thing, which you know how
Yep.
that goes. And I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
missing
It's so
out
easy to get
on
lost. Hmm.
yeah, I was missing
Yeah.
out on all of those things. So I want to go
Hmm.
to something you talked about, and you so beautifully set this up right at the very end because I heard it earlier and then you circled back to it. And you talked about how so often time is our excuse,
Hmm.
especially as moms. But what I heard in your story was that you were a mom with a 6-month baby. I mean, who has time when you got a 6-month old that literally is dependent on you 24/7 for everything? Did that thought come up? I don't know if I have time to do this, or were you just like, nope, I already know I've got time? Like maybe kind of walk us through like how
Hmm.
that does become an
Yeah.
obstacle or an excuse for
Hmm.
building a business, or saying, well, I can only do so much because, I'm a mom, or
Yeah.
because, my time isn't my own. I hear that all the time. My time's not
Right.
my own, so I can't build a business like I'd like to.
Right. Initially I don't think it came up because I started I had always had a dream to start my own business. I thought that, you know what, I'll do it when the kids are in high school and I'm older. And like I had this vision, and thank God I didn't listen to that because my kids are not anywhere near high school, right?
A long time to
Um,
wait.
I have a long time to wait. And so, I had told myself that and always had that seed way before I even had children. That seed was
Mhm.
there. And then once I had my child, I realized, okay, there's opportunity here. And so I had already started to kind of get the wheels in motion, but I didn't initially feel the pressure around time because I think it happened while I was on maternity leave. So I
Mm.
wasn't dealing with my corporate job. I had a 4-month maternity leave. And so, it was a lot, obviously, to care for a baby and adjust to being a new mom. But then I also had all these opportunities coming to me while I was on leave from like family and friends and people like in my close network. So I wasn't even having to do a lot of work to like go market, right? It was just sort of happening, like doors were being opened.
Mm.
And so because I wasn't thinking about my other job, like it didn't really impact things, right? I didn't feel
Mm.
that push until I went back to work.
Mm.
So I lasted 2 months. And I want to acknowledge that, like, there are a lot of women who are running, working 9 to 5s, running their businesses on the side, being a mom. Like, God bless all of you because I really struggled with that. I only lasted 2 months because at one point I said to my husband, I was like, there's no way that
Mm.
I can care for my son, Jackson, and be able to, work even a very not demanding corporate job at all. Like, it wasn't demanding, but like be able to do that and run the business. Like, I was like, something's got to give. I remember like tearfully telling him because I could feel the pressure. I could feel and I'm like, this isn't healthy. And
Mm.
so that's when we made the decision, you know what? I'm gonna like we can swing it. It's gonna be very tight. We're gonna have to cut back on a million things. But that was what we opted to do. I know everybody kind of handles things differently, right? And makes different decisions. That was what worked best for us. And so I think it came later. It came, when I went back to maternity leave or from maternity leave and was struggling with the idea of like managing these three things and being like, well, wait, if I need to be a present mom for my son, which obviously he has needs I can't ignore and I don't want to ignore, but then I got to have one other thing that I'm focused on. Like I can't do those other two things. It just doesn't make sense right now with the capacity that I have. Would it have been different if it were my second or third child? Maybe, but it wasn't, right? I was learning how to be, how to be in this role and that takes time. And so I think that's when I really started to be like, I don't feel like I have the time or mental bandwidth to do this. So what decision am I going to make? And ultimately, what came down to making the decision to really go all in on the business and go full time much earlier than I thought I would. I mean, in the back of my mind, it was, well, what happens if you don't do this? Like, are
Mm,
you always going to wonder what if, you
yeah.
know? And I felt very convicted by that. And so I think the fact that my husband was on board was helpful. Like
Mm,
he saw how much I wanted this and just how hard it would have been
mm.
to try to manage all of that. And he didn't want that for me. He didn't want that for our family. But yeah, that was when I really had to just be like, okay, what can I do here? And I think that is important because while, like, absolutely, we don't want the amount of hours to be a limitation, I also think we have to be realistic too
Yes.
about our
For the season we're
capacity in
in.
different seasons,
Mhm.
right? Like, my capacity looks different in this season, being a mom of three. All my kids are in school now. This is the first year that I don't have anybody at home. So, totally new. Eight
Mm.
and a half years later after starting the
Right?
business. But like the
Yeah.
bulk of my business has been raising young children, having, the young kid, like a new baby come into the family, adjusting to that. And it's like, okay, I've also had to be very realistic about what I take on and the decisions I make because I don't have all the time in the world, you know?
Right. 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 I love this because here's what I heard is that you saw opportunities in the same situation that someone else would have been like, there's no way I can. Right. And I think that so often it's what we're choosing to see and what we're choosing to believe more than, just the fact that I'm a young mom or even I'm working or whatever that
Hmm.
neutral situation is. What can be the reason for someone like you to step into business is the exact reason that someone else uses as an excuse as to why they can't. And
Yeah.
so,
And not to interrupt you, but I've never thought about like, well, as you're saying that, I'm like, this is something I don't think I've ever really spoken about or said out loud.
hmm,
Like I kind of gloss over it where it's like, oh, it was a big financial sacrifice.
hmm,
What does that mean though? You want
yeah.
to know what that means? We went without a lot of things. Like
Mm,
I'm just going to and I'm not telling people what to do with their finances, but like our lifestyle changed. I knew that it was temporary. And ultimately, all of this comes from the Lord anyway, right? So, like, it wasn't about, this is the lifestyle I want, but our lifestyle completely changed. Like, we didn't eat
mm,
out, we didn't go on
mm,
vacation, we cut back substantially in order for me to make this sacrifice. And I think that's also important to note too. Like, what changes do you need to make? Because it can be done, but what it requires, a lot of people just aren't willing to do.
mm,
And I don't think I've ever like spoken publicly about that. I didn't take out a loan. I
mm.
didn't get money from anybody. Nobody gave me money to fund my business. I was completely self-funded. My very first investment in a coach came out of our family savings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think it's so important to note that too, because yeah, I made it happen, but there were a lot of trade-offs that I had to make
Mhm.
that I don't know that a lot of people talk about.
That's so true. But here's what I do hear as you're talking, and I know from my own
Yeah.
experience, you knew that investing that time, you knew
Hmm.
that investing that money, you knew
Yep.
that even sacrificing, the time and money that you were, to change your situation was going to bring in a return on investment, an ROI, right? And therein is
That
the
long-term
difference.
vision, right? Yeah.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
talked even
Yeah.
about the long-term fruit. I wrote
Yeah.
that down because fruit
Hmm.
is one of the things that God just keeps bringing up to my head. Is like, what is the fruit
Yeah.
of the way that I'm building my business? What is the fruit of the way that I'm living my life? Right. And what I also love too is that so like I love how you are like showing these young moms like you can do this. It doesn't matter the age of your kids, like don't let that
Yep.
be the excuse. I didn't
Yeah.
even start business till the year I turned 40. For me, it was more of the
Yeah.
what just happened? Where did time go? Where am I
Yeah.
going? My kids are
Yeah.
going to be out of here soon. I now have an empty nest, right? And so what I find is I work with women in midlife. It's this interesting season because all of a sudden we quote unquote have all this time.
Hmm.
And it's really easy to do one of two things, either to waste it because there's literally no structure to it because you don't have kids
Right.
schedules and, I got to get them to
Yeah.
school by this time or to this practice or whatever, right? Always things going on. So it's easy to kind of like just fritter away our time. Or what I fell into was I was just working all the time because I got all this time. I don't have to drive people places. I don't have
Right.
to come up places.
Right.
Like awesome. I can
Yeah.
just work all day long and all night. And
Yeah.
this is yeah, which
Yeah.
is not healthy either. And so it's like, yeah, how do we then I want to come back to this whole idea of how do we not double the time in order to increase that ROI, in order to double the income and things like that. So let's kind of dive into
Yep.
that more.
Sure.
Like, why do we think that if my income is A and I want it to be
Yep.
2A, I have to now put in twice as much time.
Mhm.
Like, where is that kind of, where do you think that's coming from? And what does that lead to when we're giving into that? And then we'll kind of start transitioning to like what's really true
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
around how it is possible to not. Because I mean, I will say it is possible to double your income and double your time, right? But that's
Yep.
probably not what we're going after. So,
Right. Yeah, you absolutely can do that. And I think that's I think that mode of thinking has been in society for a long time. Like if you think about, like that old school mentality of like you have to put in the work, which is true. You do have to put in the work,
sure.
but I think it's like we have these beliefs about what putting in the work means. And I think for many people, it's like, well, if I can only, if I work X amount of hours, then this is how much money I can make. Like the time is directly related to how
Mm,
much money comes in. And that also comes from being an employee, right? Like if you come
yes.
from the
Trades
corporate
pay for
world,
money.
yep, or you come from the agency world. I came from the agency world as well. And I remember being told, like, you bill whatever time you spend thinking about a client. Like, if you think about a client in the shower, you bill that time, right? Like, it's bill, 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 bill. And so it is hard to get out of that mode of thinking. It's not an instant, like, flick of a light switch. Like, I think when we start our businesses, we're still very much in that place, and it does take time to get out of that. And so, I do believe that's where a lot of the thoughts around time and money come from.
Mm,
I also just think that when you start your business, I mean, are there people who start with a course or who start with a membership or who start with a group offer? Yes. Do I think it's harder to start with that? Yes,
mm,
absolutely 100%. So I think for many of us, like while you can start with that kind of an offer, most of us started with just like what we knew. Like I just started with done for you, right? I just started with, okay, like this project's going to take X amount of hours. Like that's how I decide how much to charge the client. Like that's how we're figuring out,
mm,
what that looks like in terms of our business and the way we want to run it. And so I think for the first, initial part of business, we do stay stuck in that place. And you
mm,
can stay there for a lot longer if you're not careful. And so the first time I was really challenged around this was when I was taught, well, I've been challenged a couple of times, but the first real time that I was challenged around this was in 2018 at the end of the year. So around the time that we're recording this, probably was around the time that I had this conversation with my coach, where, at the time I had a toddler. My first two sons are 19 months apart. So I had a toddler and a
mm,
baby at home. And I was working 2 days a week. And it wasn't even full days. It was just two, like, I think 5 hour days. My mom, God love her, like, was
mm,
watching the kids, right? Like, such a blessing. But then that was it. I didn't have much time at all. And I remember, I supplemented time outside of those 10 hours, which was fine. That's what needed to happen. But it definitely didn't go beyond 20 hours, right? And I had made like 54K in 2018. And I had told my coach, I'm like, I really want to make six figures in 2019, like so badly. Like that was just a dream of my heart. And I was like, but I'm just going to set my goals. Like we were talking about setting goals for the new year. I was like, I'm just going to set my goal though for 50K again because I can't increase my hours. So I can't increase my goal.
mm,
And she said, well, who says? And I was like, huh. Like that question sparked in me, what if it could be possible? Because I believed for so long that it couldn't.
wow.
And when I thought about that, I was like, well, it becomes very clear then what offer, because I did have a group offer that I had started to create, but I hadn't poured a lot of like time and attention into. I was like, well, if I'm going to do that and not increase my hours, I'm going to have to make different decisions about what
Mm,
clients I take on and what offers I sell.
yeah.
That led to me phasing out done for you and moving into really making my group program the center. I would say in 2019, which was a six-figure year, I actually doubled my revenue. The first, I shouldn't say the first time around. I think from 2017 to 2018, when I first started, I doubled my revenue.
Mm,
But then 2018, but I think I probably doubled my hours. I think my hours went up a lot during that
sure.
time. 2018 to 2019 was the first year that I mean, I went from 54K to like almost 150K. So we're talking maybe even triple, right?
Mm,
And my hours stayed exactly the same, but
mm,
that's because I started selling the group program and really getting clients in the door. I still had a lot of one-to-ones. I still had some done for you, but that was starting to be phased out. And then in 2020, I did it again.
mm.
And that was crazy because I had a third child, right? Like my time was probably the most strapped during that
Right.
period of time,
Yeah.
right? And
I
I did
think
it
three is the
again.
hardest transition because you're not what I would always call zone defense. When
So
we had
hard.
two, it was like my husband could take one, I could take one. I
Yeah,
had
people
two
told me
hands,
it would be easier.
two
They were like,
hands.
"Oh, 1 to 2 is harder than 2 to 3." I'm like, what were you telling me? Because I did not find that to be the case. So that was the year that when things were super challenging, but I doubled my revenue again and my hours were probably less. Like my hours probably went down, if I'm being honest, just because of the nature of like going on maternity leave and, having a baby that I was dealing with and trying to become a mom of three and all that I, needed to navigate there. But that's because my group program was the main thing I sold. I made six figures just from my group offer alone,
Mm,
completely phased out, done for you.
yeah.
So like I had to make different decisions in the
Hmm.
business. And so when I say double your revenue without doubling your hours, I don't mean that you're going to continue making the same decisions though. You
Right.
do have to make different decisions. You
Right.
have to think about your time differently. You have
Hmm.
to challenge this outdated idea that like the hours I have equals how much time I can make or how much money I can make. Like you've got to challenge that a little bit. And it doesn't mean that we don't take care of our clients and that we
Sure.
also don't spend any time on our business. I think that there's been, this is just my opinion, not to go on a tangent here, but I think there's been an unhealthy kind of extreme type
Mm.
fluctuation in the industry where it's like either you work all the hours and you kill yourself and you're not present with your kids, right? You just drive yourself crazy working, or you don't do anything. You work an hour a day and like everything's light and airy and you just sit around and watch Netflix if you don't feel like working. I'm like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's got to be a middle ground.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
like working.
Yes.
Also, I will say, and I feel like there's so many women who maybe don't feel like there's others out there like them. Like we like working. I don't necessarily want to work fewer hours. I'm
No.
good with how much I'm making. I've
Yeah.
never been able to have full-time work. Even now, like I still have to pick the kids up from school. There's still stuff we have to do, right? So like full-time will never be my thing. But like I don't want to necessarily work less. I
Mm.
enjoy my work, right? And I also think that's
Mm.
important to know too. Like it's okay to want to work more, but like what does make sense for this season of your life and season of, business? The point is that sure, even if you want to work more, we don't want it to be so much more that the
Mhm.
business starts to take over
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
your family and your health, right? Your
Right.
your physical health, your emotional
Mhm.
health, and your spiritual health.
Yeah, because this is what I find when women get into midlife and the kids start leaving the nest or at least start becoming more independent. So just shout out to all you young moms out there. They do eventually leave. Like it's like I think all of a sudden these women that I
Yeah.
work with, this was me, is like, who am I? Like I've been on the back burner for so
Yeah,
long. So yes,
I
we are
bet.
having health issues or identity
Hmm.
issues, or I don't have any much friends outside of, standing on at the bus pickup line, or
Yeah.
what do I even like to do for fun anymore? Like those kinds of
Yeah.
things. And I think
Yeah.
you're right. Like if we let business take over life, then we're missing out on these other areas of our life. I talk about 8 key areas of our life here on the Redeemer Time podcast, and they're all valuable. It doesn't mean they all get the same amount of time each day. Like for sure, my business gets more time than some of those other ones each day, but that's okay because I'm still paying attention to those other areas.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't want one to balance. Like I talk about balance being not a noun, but a verb. I think we're all looking for like the equal. If I work 4 hours, then I need to spend 4 hours with my family. Not a bad thing, but it's not formulaic where it's like this, like even
Yeah.
Steven, I'm trying to get this perfect
It's
equilibrium.
not. It's
It's a
not.
verb. It's what needs my attention to keep me from falling too far in one direction or another. It's like the ballerina who's constantly just making little adjustments with those toes, up on her points
Yeah. Yeah.
to keep from falling over. So I want to go back to a couple things that you said because like this was just like I think this is the key. And I'm sure that you know this, and I don't know if you voiced it this way or not, but what I heard was the first thing you had to do was shift your beliefs because you were believing that in order to increase my income, I have to increase my time, equally, right? Like, so if I want to increase my income twice, then I have to increase my time twice or, in proportion. That's the word I'm looking for. And that's one of the things that we talk about is like looking at what am I believing about my time, about my business, about my results, about my whatever, because our thoughts steer our emotions, our execution or lack thereof, and then lead to our results. And so I heard you go through that process with your coach. And once you went, oh, maybe there is another model. Maybe I could believe that it is possible to increase my income and not, proportionally increase my hours. Then it was like, now I heard you go to step 2 in my mind, which was, okay, now I'm looking at what decisions have I been making? What has been the result of that? And
Yep.
if I want to now move into this new place, how can I now show up as this next level CEO that's making these next level type decisions around where my time is going?
Yeah. And I have
And
to also not feel guilty for it. So I
right?
do think there's guilt that comes into play here where it's like, can it be that easy? Like, can I
It's easy, but
really?
it's not simple, right? I
For
would,
sure. Oh
right?
my goodness, not at
Yeah.
all. Right.
Yeah.
But like, can it, like, I remember almost feeling guilt too, like in that moment when I was thinking about, 2019 and wanting to make six figures, like, wait a second, am I allowed to make six figures working part
Mm.
time with two kids at home? Like, can that be for me?
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of guilt, especially in the Christian space,
Okay, let's talk
especially
about
if
that
you,
because I like to always
yeah,
pull out how
especially if
should we
you
do
grew
this
up.
differently?
Yeah, especially if you grew up in the church. I mean, everybody's experiences are different, right? But
Sure.
for me, like having grown up in a Christian home, grown up in the church, which is wonderful, by the way. I'm not at all
Yeah.
trying to say that that's not, but I do think that there's a lot of things that are taken out of context about money.
Mm.
And I understand why, right? But I think that it
Mhm.
can feel easy. Like I work with a lot of Christian women. I don't exclusively work with Christian clients, but I do have many of them just because they see that in me. And obviously
Sure.
there's a connection there. And I will say that many of them have felt guilty for raising their prices, for
Mm.
charging a certain amount because it's like, well, this is ministry, or like I shouldn't,
Mm.
or money is evil. And what we have to understand and remind ourselves is it's the love of money that is the root of all evil, right? The love of money. And the way that I, think about that is okay, the love of money, meaning I am chasing money over other things, more
Mm.
importantly, over, the Lord, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the problem. It's not making money because money comes from God. Like
Mm.
he has blessed me in my business. He has blessed my family.
Mm.
Who am I to say that that's wrong? It's not wrong. It's the letting money consume you and making that an idol in your life. And I think that was an important distinction for me
Mhm.
that I had to really grapple with in business, especially as my business started making more money. Like, how do I make sure this doesn't get off track? And believe me, it does. There
Sure.
have been times, and I've talked very recently about this, like where I started to notice money's playing too big of a role and I need to
Mm.
like do something about
Mm.
that, right? I need to
Yeah.
kind of get myself in check. But I do think that leads to a lot of guilt. Like there are a lot of women who want to make more money in their business and are like, well, can I, number one, is it safe to make more money, especially as a Christian woman? But
Mm.
then number two, like, is it okay to make more money and do it with the hours that I have? It almost feels too good to be true. It almost feels too easy. And
Mm.
so we don't let ourselves have that. And I think that's an important distinction as well because you can follow the process that you just outlined, right? The process where I challenged myself and thought about different decisions. But if you feel guilty for
Mhm.
making those decisions, you will sabotage it.
Yeah, it
Like
goes right back to that first step one, which was the
100%.
belief.
Yeah.
You can't not do the belief part. And for so
Right.
long, I'm a doer girl. I'm a give me a formula, a
Yep.
checklist, a
Yep.
show me the steps,
Yep.
one, two, three. I will follow it to a T and
Yep.
then some. I don't need the mindset stuff. I got Jesus. Like that was literally my
Yeah.
mindset up
Yeah.
until a couple of years ago. And God really did a work of like, okay, we need to look at what you're believing. And I think the things that you just said around money are exactly the same thing about our time, right? When I am chasing a clock or a calendar, when I'm chasing my value in what I'm doing with my time or having enough of my time or being busy, right? Or whatever it is, like it has become an idol. And it's a lesser thing that I'm putting on the throne of my heart, just like money can be, just like all these other things can be. And so
Yep.
I think those things are so parallel. And I truly
Yeah.
believe and teach God has given us three things that He has entrusted to us in order that He is calling us to steward for Him: our time, our treasure, which would be our include our money and our talents. And when I think about the parable of the servants, right? Like he doesn't want us to be like the servant that went and buried
Right.
those things because I mean, he even said to the guy who went and buried it, he's like, you could have at least put it in the bank and made some interest. I
Yeah.
mean, the master was not against making money, right? Like it was you were out of fear holding back and you weren't
Mhm.
paying attention to the fact that I entrusted this into your hands for the purpose of building my kingdom, right? And so
Mhm.
I feel like yeah, not, and I mean, I do not believe in prosperity gospel type stuff at all, but I do believe
Same.
when
Yeah.
we partner with God, there is
Yeah.
always an abundant ROI
Yes.
because that's how he works. And we should,
Yeah.
our businesses as Christian women, we should be making money, right? It should look different than people who are just doing it by the world standards and the world's ways because we're doing it with God. That's like our secret
Yep.
sauce. That's like our superpower that,
Yep.
those who don't know him don't get. So let's just kind of like, again, I love to get practical and I kind of threw out what I heard as a couple of steps, but I want to give you an opportunity. Like, so some, like you're like, okay, how would you walk us through? Like, let's say we've already dealt with the guilt
Mhm.
of the
Yep.
making money and the time and all of that.
Yes.
And I'm ready to like, okay, now move into some practical steps.
Yes.
What would be a couple of things that you would suggest to start moving in that direction?
There are three things that you need to look at. The first being your offer,
Okay.
and that includes like how your offers are packaged, the
Mhm.
price, the type of clients that you're serving. So that's what I mean when I say offer.
Yep.
Marketing, client delivery.
Hmm.
And by marketing, I also mean sales. So let's say
Sure.
marketing slash sales and client delivery, how you're serving your clients.
Hmm. Yeah.
Those are the three areas that we need to look at if we want to double our revenue without doubling our hours. So the offer is the first place to go. Cause
Mhm.
like if you don't start there, everything else, like everything else is guided by the offer, right? So it's
Right.
like you have to reverse engineer. You have to start, you know, back up at the offer piece
Hmm.
before you know what to do when it comes to marketing. And then because your offer will guide how much marketing and selling you need to do, and then also the way that you serve your clients. And so the first thing you want to do, and this is kind of a twofold thing that I will do with my clients, is streamline and scale. And what I mean by
Hmm.
that is we focus first on looking at the clients you're already serving, whether it's in one-to-one coaching or, as a done for you provider. And we look at, okay, what is most profitable? Because if you have a lot of different services and things you do, which most people do, like we start out, I think this is
Doing
important to know, right?
everything.
Yeah, like kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, like when I first started out, I did everything because I wanted the experience, and that's good, and that serves you in business. What happens though is like we end up with all these different projects and all these different types of clients at different price points, and it can feel very scattered. And so we want to start by streamlining that. I
Hmm.
don't believe that you need to get rid of any type of one-to-one work to be able to scale. I just think you have to look at, okay, are all of these my ideal clients?
Hmm.
Are all of these services and projects that I want to be doing, like, do they light me up? Do they use my talents well?
Hmm.
Probably not. The answer is probably not all of them. Okay, if you're honest.
Yeah.
And then you also need to look at profitability. So, like, where is there the most profit for me? Like,
Hmm.
certain clients are probably more profitable than others.
Hmm.
And so, what I recommend is we streamline, meaning we have, a fewer clients that we serve, maybe at higher prices, because
Hmm.
those are clients that have a greater need for our services, or we're able to, maybe there's certain things we don't offer anymore. We don't do because it takes us so long. It doesn't light us up. Like if something doesn't light you up, that is going to suck profit out of your business, you
And it's going to
know?
make it take more time because you're going to put it off or only be half present when you're doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
I often teach this. I'm curious if you would agree. I
Yeah.
often teach this that every offer you have is actually its own business because it has, as I'm looking at your three, every offer
Yep.
has its own marketing and
Yep.
sales because it
Yep.
has its own best client and it has its own delivery. And so I'm thinking
Yes.
about that person who's got a whole bunch of offers, thinking she's followed the guru's advice of have the offer suite of all these different levels of things so they can start wherever. But every single one is a separate business. Now she's scattered so far out, right?
100%.
So thin. Of course, nothing's going to grow enough to really like feel like it's
No, no.
building
And I
something.
actually think there's a way to fit the two offers together. And I'm saying
Mhm.
two because I think if you really want to scale, you need to have one or two main
Yeah,
ones. It
I
doesn't mean you
agree.
can't create other
Yep.
things, but way too many people are I joke they're changing offers like they change their underwear. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, it's like every day
You're
something new.
confused. Your audience is
It's
confused. Your
low
clients are
ticket. I
confused.
mean, it's low ticket, which means you need like 100 people to buy to even make any money.
Yeah.
So many people are being, in my opinion, advised in a way that it doesn't mean it can't work, but it's why are we choosing a harder path? Business is hard enough as it is. Life is hard enough as it is, right? So I help my clients streamline their done for you or their one to one so that they have a handful of clients that they really love, that they can go deep with,
Hmm.
that actually many of them end up making the same amount of money they were making before, just with fewer clients, which saves you
Hmm.
time
Right.
because then you're going to need that time to create a scalable offer. And when
Yeah.
I say scalable offer, I do recommend something like a group program
Mm-hmm.
versus like a $97 course or a $97 a month membership
Hmm.
because it can be a little bit like you can charge a little bit more because you can have like a group program that's very high touch, that's very personalized. It allows you to kind of get practice with serving clients in that type of a container, which I think is a benefit. So it's a win-win in that your clients are being served really well. You're learning how to serve them because there's a lot more like access to you and high touch,
Hmm.
maybe even some one-to-one included within the group setting. And then you can also charge accordingly so that you still don't need a million clients. Like, yes, you're signing, it's a one-to-many offer. So you're signing multiple clients at once, but you don't need 10, 100 to make the money that you want to make. So what I recommend they do is they stack that scalable offer, like the payments that come in through that scalable offer. And I do recommend you structure it in a way that allows people to pay on a payment plan, right? Like to be able to have payments come through. Some people will create a scalable offer for like, $297 and it's a 4-week thing. And then guess what? You just need volume. You need
Then you're
every
back
month you're
to,
like
yeah.
starting over again. No, I think you can have those offers later in your business. I think that the main offers should fund the course, the membership, the thing that you're going to need a lot of volume to come through. Like it's an investment, right? And that kind of an offer, getting it off the ground and getting the amount of people through that will make you money. So let the bigger offers fund that in your business. Like I do think there's an order to things. I really do. And so, if you can create that kind of a scalable offer, then the beautiful thing is that you're leveraging your time and you're stacking that cash on top of what you're making from one-to-one and done for you. So that's the first thing that I think you need to do, right? Because then from there, it's like, okay, that's going to guide your marketing.
Mm,
So what am I marketing? I actually think that if you can tailor the scalable offer to cultivate relationships with clients in that offer and then have those clients level up to working with you at your highest level offer, you'll never need to market your highest level offer publicly again. Like
mm,
I have had clients who never need to market their done for you or one-to-one services because they have so much demand from the people in
mm,
their scalable offer, from the people in their group program. And
mm,
so that also will cut down on the amount of marketing that you need to do because then it's like I don't need to market 10 million offers and
right.
have my audience be confused. I can really focus on what I call the power of one.
Mm,
One main offer,
mm,
one main platform, one main message. Like let's make it simple. That I have not been able to do these extravagant marketing strategies, even if I wanted to, because I don't have the time, right? Like I've had to keep things very lean, very efficient with having 3 kids at home and all the things that I mentioned earlier. So that's how I handle marketing and selling. And that's driven by the main offer, the one that you want to become known for. And
mm,
that has to shift, right? If you want to scale, it can't be, I want to become known for the done for you offer because I don't have as many spots. Like I only have so
sure.
much capacity, right? Then that also dictates the client delivery. So,
Mm,
how are we delivering services for our clients in that type of an offer? It can be very tempting to shift into a group offer and feel like you have to over deliver because maybe you feel a little bit nervous, like I don't have as much like control as I felt like I did, with my one-to-one. So, I think a lot of people tend to overserve clients. And this is where we have to take a step back and look at, I call it the responsibility exercise. What is your responsibility? What is the client's responsibility? And this can also apply and should apply to your one-to-one offer,
mm,
right? Like really looking at where am I over serving the client, not because it's what's best for them, but because it's what's best for me, because of my own insecurity and maybe attaching my self-worth to what the client thinks of me. Like sometimes I think we try to earn the client's approval by over serving them. And to be honest with you, I mean, that goes against what the Lord says in scripture. Like we should not have a fear of man, right? Like we should have a fear of God. Like we're not, trying to gain approval. It doesn't mean we don't want to do good work for our clients, but I would imagine that most of your listeners are women who care so much about doing a good job that they can actually slip into the other side, which is
yeah.
just that chronic over delivering.
Yeah.
I see that. I mean, honestly, if you even just solved that and addressed that, that would also free up a lot of time without even doing anything else with the offer piece. But I
Mm,
also think it becomes really important when you do create this kind of a scalable offer that you're also, putting your responsibility for your clients in its rightful place. Because what also happens is we take so much responsibility for our clients that we stop marketing our business. Well,
sure.
what happens when we stop marketing our business? You might not feel those effects right away. You'll feel them 90 days from now when you have no more leads.
That's what I was just going to say. Where are your
That's
businesses
not
right
being a good
now?
steward of your business, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You have to look back 90 days.
Yeah.
What seeds were I planting? What seeds were I
Amen.
watering? Was I
Yes.
watering? There's my English.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
because it takes time. You don't plant and reap in the same season. There is time in between. And so this
Amen.
is
Oh
so
my God.
important.
Well, and nobody, our industry doesn't talk about that
Mm.
at all. Like what you just
Overnight
said.
success, right? Mm.
Well, yeah, and I don't know that they call it that, but it's like we're an impatient society. Like I love
Yes.
Amazon Prime. I'm going to be honest with you. I am
Right?
very impatient. Like I am an impatient person. My husband, God love him, slows me down. But it's like I'm like, all right, let's get to it. Let's go. Let's go. And that's just the way that we're wired. But you cannot, like, people have such unrealistic expectations about their business
Mm.
because of what you just said. They're
Mhm.
thinking I need to plant and reap the harvest in the same exact time. Like,
Mhm.
if I do this thing, it needs to come back immediately. No, like these are all the decisions I'm talking about, the three areas that I just talked about.
Mm.
You have to have a long-term view.
Right.
You
Yeah.
have to know where you're going. You have to think bigger than just what am I getting today? Because if you only ever think about this moment in your business, you're going to make short-term decisions that are not necessarily where you want to go. You're going to take on clients who aren't a good fit just to get the money. Ask me how I know, right?
Mhm.
You're going to make marketing decisions. You're probably not even going to market. You're probably just going to focus on serving your clients and not even think about your marketing until you need more clients and then realize, oh, wow, I really should have been doing this work ahead of time. Like that's how a lot
Mhm.
of women end up with no demand and then they go around saying nobody's buying. Well, they're not buying from you because you didn't take the time. This is some tough love coming in, but like you didn't take the time to really steward your audience, right?
Right.
And I just
Yeah.
think that that's so important. Anytime I've made short-term decisions in my business, and sometimes we do, I should say, sometimes we do have to make short-term decisions because maybe that's what our business needs for whatever reason. There
Sure.
are times like that, right? But on the whole, when I've made short-term decisions in my business, I've always decided in favor of things that will bring in money now, but have not been fruitful for me in the long
Mm.
term. And believe me, the Lord has like convicted me over that.
Mm.
And I just think that
Wow.
that's so important to say because there's
Yeah.
no way I would have gotten to where I've been in my business had I said, well, I can't, sell my group program right now. I've only ever really sold done for you in one-to-one, and that's what people are buying. And I need clients now. And like I had to make some sacrifices, even sacrificing like oh, I need one done for you client or I need one-to-one spot filled. I let that go in favor of selling my group program, which then in turn did fill that spot
Mm.
because I had people coming to me, more people coming to me because I was creating a name and authority for myself. A lot of women aren't giving themselves enough space to create authority in marketing because they're getting hung up on the short-term
Mm.
decisions. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Like I love this conversation and I'm studying and starting to teach right now the law of the harvest and how that applies to our business. All
Yes.
these
It really
principles. And
does.
Jesus used these illustrations all the time, of like look at the way that God created the world to work, right? And who are we to expect like, it's going to be some other way and we can just force, put the seed in and force the plant up. And I mean, yes,
Well,
he
then
may
we don't have
something.
faith. Then we
Yeah.
then we don't have faith. Like I also can see where the Lord, and as I'm saying this, I'm like laughing because something will happen tomorrow where I'm like, go
Right.
back to the conversation you just had with Lissa. But like the faith, it strengthens our faith and our trust in him that he's going to provide in our business. If we just like instantly plant something and immediately get the fruit, and sometimes that does happen, and I think that's the Lord's blessing and mercy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
goodness. But like if we immediately get that, reap that reward, I think we become entitled. I don't think we rely on him more. I think we rely on him less.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that he's like punishing us either. Like I agree with you. I'm not a prosperity gospel person. I'm also not a God's just punishing us,
Right.
everything. I think there's extremes on both ends, right? But I do think he uses those moments where it's like that waiting period where we're waiting for the seeds we planted to sprout. Like there is so much spiritual growth that can happen, right? Not to mention growth as a business owner, as a CEO. I mean, ideally those are going to go hand in hand. If
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that, then we miss out on that, which I know is uncomfortable and not fun and not simple. It might be easy, but it's not like simple in
Mm-hmm.
that regard because our brains love to concoct all these stories. But I do think that some of that is for our benefit.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, if we got everything we wanted the moment we asked for it, number one, we'd be entitled. Number two, I think we'd be disappointed. I think we would really miss out on God's better because we thought we knew best. And so it's this like healthy tension between trusting him and also doing our part, right? And letting him, guide and
Yeah. I
and
mean,
bring
can I
that
say
growth.
one quick thing about
Mhm.
that? Like, not to again go off on a tangent here, but like I'm coming as we're recording this. I don't mind being transparent. I'm coming off of the end of a very difficult year, a year where even though the business was doing well, I found myself chasing money. I found myself
Mhm.
getting consumed by things that I knew were not good
Mhm.
because my business was growing, because I was scaling, right? I found myself going in a direction that I didn't love with
Mhm.
clients that just they were great clients but weren't the direction I wanted to move in. An offer that I didn't really want to keep selling. Like there were so many decisions I had to make this year that were very, very difficult and there was no immediate fruit. I
Yeah.
am coming off of the end of a 6 to 8 month period of just feeling uncertain in my business, feeling a bit out of place, resisting where I really wanted
Mhm.
to go because I told myself it wasn't going to work. Right. And now I am finally getting to a place where I have given myself permission. I've heard from the Lord. I've taken
Mhm.
time to pray. I've given myself permission to go
Mhm.
after what I want in my business and to stop worrying about the what ifs in the future and to let God take care of that. And the fruits that I am seeing are insane right now. I've been talking about it very publicly too, because I know more people need to hear that. And so I say that as encouragement because I know what it's like to go through those dark periods where it doesn't feel like there's answers, where you feel like it's so murky. You don't know like what God is telling you. Like there were so many times where I'm like, what does he want from me in my business? Like I honestly don't know. And I felt crazy because I'm like, I've been doing this for 8.5 years. I felt like I was going through a midlife crisis in my business, right? Because I've been in business for a while. But you will go through those periods. This won't be the last period either, but like how cool to see. Like yesterday, I signed two absolutely incredible dream clients who are exactly the kind of clients that I want to be working with that I resisted for like 8 months, even
Mm.
doing, right? And then I felt so confused and all that. But I'm not confused right now because I was able to go through that period. So I also just say, like, that period, as uncomfortable as it was, is leading to so much fruit in my business.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the pruning, sometimes it's just the
Pruning,
learning.
yes,
Sometimes it's
yes.
I always like to say, like, when it looks like nothing's happening, everything's happening. There's so much that
Everything's
happens
happening.
under the ground
Yes.
in the dark places that nobody ever sees. This is the CEO work that a lot of people aren't willing to do, to think about their time, to think about the ROI on their time, to think about, like what God is specifically calling them to. And if they don't take the time to do that, then, yeah, what do we just keep doing the same thing, getting the same results, which may be okay. But is that really what God's best is for us? So, girl, we could talk all day long
Yes.
about
Mhm.
this. I think we're like sisters at heart. And so I'm so glad
Yes.
that God allowed our paths to cross. So my
Same.
audience I know is like, I want some more Michelle. So where can people find you and connect with you? And what are kind of like what you would have to offer as a next step for them?
Yeah, come into my community Market Like a Boss. That is where I show up and talk about all of the things that we just mentioned. So that's a place where we can really, I mean, I'm big on relationships. So that's a place where we can really connect and talk about, the realities of running a business too. I think it's important to have those conversations. I'd like to have more of them in my community. So definitely check that out. Of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me and send me a message on Facebook. That's kind of where I primarily hang out. I do have a podcast, Market Like a Boss as well, that you can kind of check out. And obviously
Yeah,
yours
I will
truly
be on
has
there.
been featured. Yep.
Yes.
And so, that's where I kind of take some of these concepts and unpack them a little bit more. And that's where I'll really be doing, I think, a lot more in the new year, especially with the podcast and with the community. So those are the best places to just come soak things up. I'd love to hear from you. If something resonated, like I am an open book. I love, love, love hearing from my community. My DMs are always open. So you're also welcome to send me a message there.
I love that. Well, speaking of community, the Redeem Her Time community is where we take the conversation off the podcast and into real life and real business. And so I am inviting all of our listeners and Michelle to come into the Redeem Her Time community where we're going to have some more conversation around the things that we talked about today and around what this is stirring up in you or the questions that you may still have or the what ifs or the I don't know if this is possible because or I feel like we need to continue that conversation and apply it to our lives and our businesses. So if you are not already a member of the Redeem Her Time community, what are you waiting for, girl? Head to redeemhertime.com/community. I will link that in the show notes as well. Come join the conversation because this is where we are doing that work, right? We are doing the CEO work that maybe other people aren't going to see, but it is going to produce the fruit because we're not only doing it with each other, we're doing it with God. And when we put God at the center of everything we do, especially our business, I do believe there's an abundant ROI. And often it's in the measurable, but it goes so far beyond that. So I'm excited for Michelle to be in there with us as well. And just want to thank you guys for being with us today. Michelle, I always love just to kind of end on this question because your time matters, right? Like, why does your ROI on your time matter to you? Like, why do you want to see the right kind of fruit coming from the way that you're investing your time?
I think that I want to see the right kind of fruit coming from the way I invested my time because to me it's like I'm going to be giving my time somewhere, right? So I'm either
Mhm.
giving it to my family, I'm giving it to my business, giving it to my husband, giving it to my community. And so wherever I am investing my time, I want to know that that was time well spent. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect and I never, waste time on things that I shouldn't be doing, but to me it's like that is confirmation that, this is where I should be like placing my efforts. Like I want to just I want not to be the best that I can be because I think that's a little bit unrealistic. Like I'm a human, I have faults, but for me, like just knowing, okay, I'm investing my time in where I need to put it in this moment because that's all we ever have is this moment. Like we don't know what the next hour is going to bring. We
Right.
don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so For me, like I'm really trying to live, more in the moment in terms of, okay, this is what's in front of me right now. Let's use that wisely. Let's focus just on that and not worry about the what ifs. I am the kind of person who just struggles sometimes with like the fear of the future and the what ifs and all of that. And God's really been working on my heart in that way.